Center for Ayurveda and so wonderful to be with you all tonight for this webinar on Ayurveda and postpartum care. So welcoming you all here into the space. Take a moment as you gather into the space, as you come into the space, just to center into yourself. I know many of us are coming from different places and may also just have had really busy days, of course. So just take a moment to come into your own body. Maybe you'd like to place a hand on your heart or on your belly. And if it feels comfortable to do so, you can close your eyes for a moment. If you'd rather keep them open, that's also okay. So whatever feels comfortable for you. So just taking 3 deep breaths. And then when you're ready, you can just roll your shoulders, just relax your shoulders and take your palms, take your hands together and rub them together. It's creating a nice warm energy. And then you can place them over your eyes and over your head, and then just take your hands down your body. And just coming into the space, feeling a little bit more present and relaxed. So before I begin sharing my slides, I am going to be just sharing a land acknowledgement. As I mentioned, I know many of us are coming from different places. I am speaking to you and sharing with you from Southern Ontario, from Oakville, Ontario, small town. As a settler on this land, I wish to honor and acknowledge the Indigenous people of this land, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Atawandaron, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. I give deep and humble thanks to cultivate relationships, to learn, study, work, birth my children, play, live, and be on this land. I give gratitude to this land, the ancestors, the plants, the earth, all of elements of creation. And in these words, I offer my thanks and my commitment to care and love for all. I also give thanks to the ancestors of my own land of India and acknowledge the privilege I've had to study and share this vast, ancient ancestral medicine of Ayurveda, which I hope and pray that I can only be a lifelong student of. And lastly, if there's any incomplete or missing knowledge that's in this session today, please just know that it's from me. Of course, it's from me, not at all a reflection of my gurus or my teachers or of this ancient medicine. Thank you, thank you. Thanks so much for being here again. So welcome. I am going to share my screen now with you all. I'm going to give a quick disclaimer that I do have children. So I have a small 1-year-old and I have a 7-year-old. So if you do hear some background noise, please forgive me on that. It's really hard to block out any sounds, but you just might hear some laughter or maybe even some screams in the background as well. So yes, tonight's topic, Ayurveda and postpartum care. We are going to do our best to share as many details that can feel supportive and accessible and hopefully inspire and activate your desire to actually share this information or share support for anyone that might be in their pregnancy or postpartum period, any families that you might be connected to. Because yes, it's not only for the birthing parent, the mother, to do this sort of preparation work for alone. It's also for community to learn how to do this kind of care as well. So this is a really foundational piece of what I hope people gain from this information. So the postpartum care period is known as Sutika Kala. Sutika is the name for the birthing parent, the mother after giving birth. And kala is another word for time in Sanskrit. This is a Sanskrit term. A little bit about myself. My name is Sairupa Krishnamurti. As you know, you can read it here, and you might have read about me before. Many of you might already be connected to me. So yeah, it's great that we're in space together here. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm also an Ayurveda practitioner. So I integrate both medicines in my practice. I work clinically with fertility, with pregnancy, and the postpartum period. I also work with babies and children. I work a lot with mental emotional care. And I also do a lot of skincare work. And this is because this is actually what brought me into doing my own healing back in 2007 when I started studying Ayurveda more formally. I was seeking out care through the Center for Ayurveda and Indian Systems of Healing. And through this, I was receiving wonderful guidance from Dr. Ismat Nathani, who I just wanted to give a lot of love and thanks to. Many of us who are trained as Ayurveda practitioners here in Canada have learned from Ismat Dalla. We are so blessed to have her love, support, her guidance in our own learning and also healing as well. So a huge thanks to Ismat Dalla. Yeah, so this is a little bit about my own practice. I have been a naturopathic doctor for around 7 years, and yeah, I work primarily virtually with a really diverse range of families. So I really find that people seek me out to work with me because I offer a very compassionate and loving space in terms of being a very inclusive space that welcomes all kinds of genders, of families, and people. So it's a little bit about me. On another note, I'm also a mother, as I mentioned. I'm an amma. This is a word in Telugu that we use. This is my mother tongue, amma. So I am a mother of, as I mentioned, a 1-year-old and a 7-year-old who I've had, just the great privilege of being able to home birth them both. And also water birth, and having the support of Ayurveda in my postpartum period, which was incredibly just moving in all kinds of ways and supportive. Also the reason why I love to share this information. So the topics that we will be moving through tonight is an intro to Ayurveda. I know that many of you that are listening in are students of Ayurveda or even practitioners of Ayurveda. So this is just going to be quite brief, but I hope that if you are new to Ayurveda, that this does inspire you to learn further as well. We are going to be discussing the transformation from pregnancy to birth, powerful transformative time. We're going to be talking about the postpartum dosha that's quite strong, and why we really focus on pacifying through this restful rejuvenation period in the postpartum time. I'm going to talk about postpartum hormones and common concerns as well, common health concerns that come up postpartum, and the beauty of how this Suddhika Kala time, the postpartum period, can be very healing, can be preventative for these health concerns to come up as well. I'll also be covering Ayurvedic guidelines for the Suddhika Kala, so the postpartum guidelines, these general ones that everyone can walk away with learning more about, and even being able to implement in your own postpartum period, or support a family in their implementation of this as well. I'll be talking about nutrition for the 6 weeks postpartum. I'll also be talking about specific foods and herbs for lactation as well. And I'll be providing a postpartum planning checklist. And this is a summary list that I'll provide for you. And it will also be something that will be emailed out after the webinar. So let's start with an intro to Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is also known as the wisdom of life. Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word. Ayu means life and Veda means wisdom. So often it's translated as the science of life or the wisdom of life. It really guides us into a wise relationship with ourself and with the environment around us. It guides us into a deeper awareness of ourself, a deeper awareness of our tendencies, our strengths, and also our weaknesses, so that we can minimize our suffering as best as possible, the suffering that we may have in our physical body. And minimizing that suffering allows for us to get to know more of our infinite self, that divine self as well. Okay, so this is just a little intro here of Ayurveda. Now talking about the basis here of Ayurvedic philosophy. One of the bases is the Panchamahabhuta, the 5 great elements. So the 5 great elements are space, also known as ether, air, fire, water, and earth. All of the elements that exist within the universe, that create the earth, also create you, also create your blood, your bones, your flesh, your senses, your organs of action as well. So all of these great elements that exist throughout the universe are also you. These elements also go on to make up the tridosha, vata, pitta, and kapha. Many of us that are very new to Ayurveda will be familiar with the tridosha already, as they've become more popularized. And just as a breakdown, a very summary understanding here is that we are all born with a prakriti, and that prakriti is based on the first breath that we take as we come into the world. That prakriti, our original blueprint, means that we have a certain makeup of those elements, a certain makeup of the tridosha. However, we all contain the tridosha within us. However, there might be a higher amount that is expressed in some of the doshas, a higher amount that speaks a little bit louder in those doshas. And that means that blueprint will give some information on our strengths, our major strengths, and then also some of the weaknesses that we might have. Because dosha actually does translate to mean fault. So it gives some idea of what sort of weaknesses might come into play. Now the Vikriti state, so Vikriti is another terminology that reflects your dosha makeup. Your Vikriti reflects your current state, which can change based on so many different factors. It can change based on traumatic events or different life stages or even seasons. And that means the dosha that might have been not showing its signs or symptoms so loudly might start showing their signs and symptoms quite loud. And an example of this could mean, oh, I have a vata kapha prakriti. This is the way I was born. I came into the world this way. But during a drier season, such as fall, I have a tendency to have constipation and drier skin. So this is showing when vata is speaking very loud, those signs and symptoms are coming up and coming into vikriti, or a state of imbalance. Ayurveda guides us to actually work on pacifying or calming the things that are speaking too loud. And that keeps us in more of a balanced state as much as possible. So I want to emphasize here, there's no perfect state of health. I always say to people I work with that healing isn't linear. There's never one point that you will get to and feel in perfection. That's not what these teachings are about. However, they are teaching you to become more aware so that you have an experience of health where you know when your symptoms might be speaking a little bit loud. You'll know when to kind of quiet. You'll have the tools to quiet them down a little bit more, to pacify them. So Ayurveda focuses on pacifying the doshas, pacifying the symptoms, or even cleansing the doshas. Pacification is known as shamana, and cleansing is known as shodhana. So doshas respond to these methods, these techniques, these remedies. And we use food, lifestyle, we use herbs as well, yoga and pranayama, to support the body in either calming, pacification, or providing cleansing of these doshas. So, what is happening in the postpartum period? The postpartum period is directly after an incredibly transformational experience from being pregnant, birthing, and a huge hormonal shift. This means there is a particular dosha that is very high, right? And I'm sure many of you will already be aware of which dosha might be, and I'll get to that in a moment. But this is a time we need pacification. We require more rejuvenation and calming and pacification at this time, a container, a womb-like space to really just allow our body to become more replenished again after such a transformative experience. Birthing is a transformative journey. So in the pregnancy state, I wanted to say that we are known in Ayurvedic philosophy and in a Sanskrit term as Dauruda, as someone who is holding two hearts, the heart of oneself and the heart of a new life of baby. That is a huge experience, something massive and potent to hold. Okay, and then once a birthing process takes place, a particular energy of vata called apana vayu takes over. This is what expels, allows the body, the uterus to contract, and allows the body to birth this new life, It's a huge transformative experience where you're not only birthing and meeting a new baby, potentially meeting a new baby, you're also re-meeting yourself as a mother, as a parent, right? So you're not only birthing a new baby, you're also re-meeting yourself. I always love this quote: the moment a child is born, the mother, the birthing parent, is also born. This is an Osho quote. So there is a birthing process. And as the baby was contained in a beautiful womb, in your beautiful womb, in this dark, warm, really warm container, the mother, the birthing parent, should also be held in this container. We don't rush and bounce back, right? So this terminology of bouncing back, we don't encourage that. We take our time to be in a postpartum period, reconnect with ourselves, re-meet ourselves as a new person, a new being. So this is more information on the doshas postpartum. So the immediate postpartum period is a time to calm increased vata dosha. Vata, particularly apana vayu, has increased exponentially. So it increases a lot towards the last days before birthing takes place. And it increases so, apana vayu being a downward motion, that also controls menstruation and also controls bowel movements, for example. This is what is powering your birthing process. If anyone that's listening to this webinar has experienced birthing, physiological birth, through the fetal ejection reflex, through feeling that intense contraction of the uterus that takes place, this is apana vayu. This is the force of this particular prana that guides baby down through the birth canal into the world. And it's ruled by vata energy. Hormones also become altered, right? So there's a huge hormonal shift. There's also voids in the abdominal cavity of the mother, of the birther, where there was once a fetus and a placenta and fluid, and now there isn't, right, through this birthing process. So there's a lot of space, right? And space, the element of space connected to vata. So vata is extremely loud. It's extremely expressed during the postpartum time, at the moment right after birth. So the purpose of the postpartum period of Sutika Kala is really pacifying this time. It's so much so on calming vata energy. Now, vata also rules junctures of time, of seasons, and of life transitions. And this being such a huge life transition, we know that it will be a very strong vata can take over, but we want to pacify it and calm it so that we can actually feel as replenished and strong and resilient as possible, moving into this next chapter of a new period of parenting, of family life. Now, I also want to say that this particular term is a popularized one as well. That's really important, is that the first 42 days will impact the next 42 years. So the 40 days postpartum, the more rejuvenation and healing and calming we do, the more warming we do during this time, can be really impactful for the health and well-being of our Agni, our balanced doshas, of our dhatus, our tissues being replenished for the next many years to come. An important thing to note here is that I have focused, a lot of the language I'm using, I'm focused around birthing a live baby. However, I really want to emphasize here that a postpartum period should take place even in states, even in the state that you might have a miscarriage, a loss, or an abortion. So it's really important to still take that time to do a nourishment and rejuvenation period to rebalance. So let's talk about the hormonal shifts occurring as well. The postpartum hormone drop is considered the single largest sudden hormone change in the shortest amount of time for any human being at any point of their life cycle. And this is a quote from Dr. Aviva Ram. From pregnancy to birth, estrogen and progesterone drop dramatically. And so in pregnancy, estrogen, progesterone, they are just really hormones that are supportive of pregnancy, and they're very high during this time. And then all of a sudden, after the birthing process, there's a huge drop. Now, doesn't it make perfect sense to really take the time to support this major shift with ample supports and lots of room for integration, processing, and healing? So I think that it does, absolutely. Now, we focus on that postpartum period, as I mentioned, to prevent some of the potential health concerns that come up. So here are some of the health concerns that are common complaints during a postpartum time. Perineal tears are common through vaginal birthing, and perineal tears can actually be healed naturally without stitches. It's very possible to do that with the help of some herbs and regular bathing and even oil application as well. However, if you are, going back to a regular routine where you're on your feet a lot, then it can actually cause some disruption of this natural healing process, and it may not be as easy to heal the tissue if there's a lot of activity. And if you're carrying a lot of weight, in these teachings that I'll be sharing, it's advised not to be doing much heavy lifting during a postpartum period of the 42 days. So this can actually cause more issues with the healing itself. It's common to experience blocked lactation ducts as well, but this can be prevented by that natural period of time of allowing baby to learn how to latch, supporting your own learning of breastfeeding as well. And also fatigue, exhaustion can play a huge role in blocked lactation ducts. So minimizing how much you do during that time frame, the postpartum period, can be extremely beneficial for preventing the pain associated with blocked lactation ducts, potentially even leading to infection as well. Excessive uterine bleeding. Through these teachings of the postpartum period, it's advised to slow down. Again, not be on your feet much. This also helps to prevent excess uterine bleeding. With Vata dosha being quite strong, it can lead to digestive disturbances like more gas or a lack of appetite and even constipation. And there's a huge focus on having very simple, warm foods during the postpartum period to prevent this from happening. This can even prevent digestive issues down the line as well. Because if we allow Vata dosha to remain being quite strong, then it can actually just remain strong without taking that time for pacification. Now, we can also see hemorrhoids that don't properly heal. So hemorrhoids are very common to see in pregnancy itself, and usually they do have a natural process of healing in after birth. But sometimes if, again, there's not an adequate rest time, there could be issues with healing. And especially if there's continued constipation as well. There could be excess hair loss. It's normal to lose some hair after birthing, but there shouldn't be excess hair loss going on for months and months. If there is, then there is an issue happening. And with the adequate nourishment and replenishment in the postpartum period, we shouldn't be seeing so much hair loss occurring. We may also see thyroid concerns coming up, autoimmunity or inflammation of the thyroid gland. Again, when we're taking gentle, slow days, that can also be supportive of preventing this very common autoimmunity to come up in the postpartum period. And finally, on the mental health side of things, the health concerns related to anxiety, depression, fear, and also post-traumatic stress. These can all be minimized in some capacity through increasing the support of the birthing period of the mother. And this is such an important one that I hope that everyone receives inspiration around. Who in your vicinity can you support, right? If you have the capacity to support in terms of their postpartum period, how can you provide it, right? This can minimize the isolation that is a huge cause for anxiety, depression, or PTSD. Now, I do want to mention, of course, if there is a mental health condition, to seek out support from a mental health counselor. It's really important not to feel stigmatized around it, because it's never your fault, right? So it's important to remember it's never your fault. It's important to seek out extra care when you need it, for sure. And sometimes there's a traumatic birth process that has occurred. And with a traumatic birth process, taking time in this postpartum period to also integrate that experience, whether it's through talking to someone trusted, whether it's through talking to a professional or talking to a dear friend or family member, that integration and processing is really important. And receiving the care you need to process through potential PTSD involved as well. Okay. And just on a note, I always like to share this particular visual, or this quote, is that a rose, if it doesn't bloom, we don't blame that flower. We don't blame that rose. We look at the environment around that flower, the quality of the soil, the brightness of the sun, the quantity and nourishment of the fresh water. We don't blame that rose, right? So we don't blame the birthing parent or the mother. We always look at what can we do in their environment to offer more support, because being pregnant, carrying life, right, is the hugest act in this world. We all come from that. And to support the birthing parent and mothers in this experience of holding life in that way is extremely key, and something we should be returning to, right? Because we have had a disruption of that fragmentation of sorts, where through a disruption of what used to be in more ancient times, or even a generation ago, right, where mothers and families were receiving the support they needed. And now, speaking also in a pandemic sort of sense, we're having such a lack of support, right, for families and new families in particular, right? So how can we improve the environment more? It's a question that I don't have all the answers to, but I do really hope to inspire more questions and more flow towards supporting new families and parents. So let's now talk about the reasons for Sutika Kala from an Ayurvedic perspective. So we're looking at this 42-day period. This is 6 weeks, and it should be 8 weeks if there's been a C-section. So this is important as well. So it takes more time to recover from a C-section because it takes longer for the wound to heal as well. So the Sutika, the birthing parent, the mother, becomes replenished during this time. The Agni is repaired. The doshas become rebalanced. The dhatus are more nourished. Dhatus are the tissues of the body. They regain nourishment after going through the huge journey of nourishing another life. They're now regaining more nourishment. Through the process of birthing, you're losing so much blood as well. You can lose a lot of blood. And we want to really support the replenishment of your blood tissue, your rakta dhatu. And your sensory organs are also being nourished and cared for during this time. They can be quite sensitive, right? So you might feel sensitive to sound or light, smell. So you're caring for your sensory organs. We are preventing acute symptoms from coming up, such as excessive bleeding. And we're also preventing future pathologies from coming up as well down the line. So some teachers of Ayurveda will say that if we're not doing careful protection during this time, this particular window of time, that there could be other hormonal concerns that take place that might even show its face during menopause itself. Or there could be other issues related to vata that come down the line as well. So yes, protect this time as much as possible. Now, just a little bit on the newborn as well. The newborn, of course, is nurtured during this time. Newborn is benefited by having a nourished sutika, a nourished mother. Baby's attachment is nourished. Baby learns how to latch because there's time and space given for that latching, for breastfeeding. And baby has a gentle, slow ushering into this new life, this new world. During pregnancy, we have so many encounters with midwives, with OBG, several appointments that occur. And we spend so much time preparing for our pregnancy and also our birthing process. But then after birth, there's very few times or opportunities to connect with professionals or connect receive the care in a health caring sense. We don't always receive that sort of guidance from another professional. So this is something that is really important to look at when we are seeing so many different health concerns during this period, right? So why not? We should be receiving that kind of care during this time. So besides also having this specific Sutika Kala period, postpartum time, having a list of resources of contacts of professionals that you might want to reach out to if needed, this is something that could be really important. Okay, and I'll be sharing and adding that to the checklist as well. So the postpartum time, in terms of guidelines, Ayurveda says that the moment after birth, there should be a lot of affirmation for the birthing parent, for the mother. There should be a lot of affirming and assurance. There should be a lot of loving family around. And maybe it's just the partner. Maybe it's the other children of the family. Maybe it's a birthing support as well. And later on, maybe that circle opens to a little bit more support of close friends and close family. But the focus should be so much on affirming the mother. Now, we also spend so much time looking forward to seeing the new baby. Of course we would. We love new life. We want to see the new baby. But we also should definitely be spending time caring for the new mother who's gone through such a massive transformation. And she's the reason, right? The birthing parent is the reason that the new life is here. So other things in terms of circle of support, consider that having support for food, for some cleaning, and for also care of the other children can allow the sutika to take the rest needed. So if there's a planning period, thinking of who might be able to offer support during this time, whether it's professional or family or friends. Now, rest during the 42 days is extremely crucial, right? It's absolutely necessary. Resting in bed as much as possible. Avoiding being on your feet, and avoid walking around bare feet. With so many sensitive spots on the foot, energy centers on the foot, we want to avoid anything cold touching the foot. So always walking with slippers or walking with woolen socks if you're in a cold climate, keeping your feet nice and cozy. This is really important. Otherwise, whole body feel more cold and exacerbate vata more. It's advised not to lift anything heavier than one's own baby. So no carrying around the car seat. Please offer support to, if you ever see a new mother carrying around a car seat, offer that support. Don't lift anything heavier than baby. It's advised to stay close to baby, right? So if it's in our control and if it's possible, do your best, do one's best to support the closeness of mother and baby, of the birthing parent and baby. They should be in the same room as much as possible during these weeks of healing. And of course, I understand that's not always possible, but the desire for it will be there. And you'll notice that. So if the birthing parent, if the mother is going to another room, there will be an automatic, the senses will be awake and aware and stretching into the other location where the baby is. So it can be quite draining to have that happen. So keeping baby and mother together as close as possible, and doing a lot of skin to skin as well. So skin to skin can promote the beautiful hormone oxytocin, this love hormone that also helps to produce breast milk as well. So supports in the process of lactation. It's also really beneficial for baby. So good flora will be added to baby's skin as well. And that good flora adds to the baby's microbiome, digestive biome. This is really helpful for prevention of things like atopic dermatitis, things like eczema, allergies, and asthma. So skin to skin is just amazing for so many things, great for regulation of the emotions of both the mother, the birthing parent, and then also a baby as well, right? So keeps baby as calm as possible too. So skin to skin has so many beautiful benefits. It's important to also be very protective of sensory organs. So protecting what is coming into your space in terms of sight, in terms of sound, in terms of smells, who might be also touching you as well, right? So just being very cautious of all things and protecting your senses. So soft music, soft sounds, soft lighting, soft everything, very gentle environment. One of the most fundamental guidelines here is staying warm. So keeping the new mother warm, minimizing all cold drafts, any AC, and any external winds coming into the space that she's resting in. Keeping it warm, warm, warm. It's important to also prioritize abhyanga, so oil massage. After about 3 days' time, sesame seed oil, almond oil, olive or coconut oil, depending on the season as well, can be applied. Always warmed oil as well. And if you have someone else to apply it for you, that's beautiful. And if not, applying it to yourself, right? So applying it to yourself either as soon as you come out of a hot shower or before you get into the hot shower. But paying special attention to your abdomen here. And this is because you want to help with the reduction of the uterus, that contraction of the uterus, which will naturally take place. So it's grown in such a way, it's become so big, now it's slowly contracting back to its normal pear-shaped size over the 6-week period. So paying special attention here. However, if you've had a C-section, you want to apply, you want to be cautious with what you're applying over the wound. So be very cautious until that first layer of skin has healed. Ayurveda also suggests tying a belly wrap around your body and around the abdomen. So that belly wrap is really amazing to apply to support that contraction of the uterus back to its normal size again. And it helps with the expulsion and the shodhana, the cleansing of any of the excess blood that's coming out, that's releasing over the 6-week period as well. Yeah, and there's a lot of people that will teach on the correct way to bind, to tie the wrap, but even something just as simple as taking a long piece of fabric and keeping your body warm, your lower back and your belly tightly surrounded by that fabric can be really beneficial. It doesn't have to be a complicated or involved tying process. However, that's amazing. If you're able to access that, that's also really wonderful. So it's advised that you can gently stretch your body because there's going to be some more tension in the shoulder area from chest feeding, from breastfeeding, from just like slouching over. Your breasts are heavier as well. So you're going to feel this posture. So having, doing some gentle stretching of the shoulders and your side body as well will just allow you to feel a little bit more relaxed too. So gentle stretching of the body, of the legs as well, but no exercise during this 6-week period. And you'll wait 8 weeks if you've had a C-section before exercising at all as well. It's advised to also sleep early and sleep whenever you have the opportunity to. However, going to sleep when baby sleeps at night, this is a really nice thing to do because you also are anticipating during these first few weeks that baby will be waking up quite often, every 2 hours, potentially even more, right, for feeding. And so sleeping early by, let's say, 8 p.m. when baby goes to sleep for the night, that you're also resting at this time too. So this can really help to minimize that exhaustion that's occurring. And I say minimize because it's hard to completely remove that away, right? But we're doing our best to support the resiliency and energy of your mind, body, and spirit during this time by taking rest where you're able to take it. The dietary guidelines during this period, I'm going to go over what is advised to avoid, and I'll also then share what to favor during this period. So very important to avoid all cold and raw foods. So no smoothies during this time frame. In Ayurveda, this can really, it's spoken of as being very dampening for the Agni, for the digestive fire. So we want to keep that warm, the digestive fire warm, by having only warm foods, right? So we avoid smoothies, although they might be convenient. We avoid them completely. We avoid any salads, anything like that. Cold drinks are completely something that you wouldn't want to have. I mean, you want to avoid having anything iced at all during this time. You avoid having things that are straight from the fridge or freezer. I will say that Ayurveda generally has a notion, this is a blanket statement, to avoid frozen food because it's been sitting for some time. So there may not be as potent prana, life force energy in that food. However, I still guide people through a process of doing some batch cooking, some freezing of food, fresh food that's been frozen that will be warmed up really well. And this is still better, right? This is still much better than choosing processed or takeout foods. So foods that have been cooked with love that are sitting in your freezer versus something that is processed. You also will be avoiding dried fruits unless they've been soaked overnight. You'll avoid nightshade vegetables, which can just be a little bit difficult to digest for those 6 weeks and harder for baby to digest through breast milk. You'll avoid brassicas. This is broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, cabbage, like more of the gassier foods. Generally avoiding anything processed during this time. Generally avoiding any fast food at all. You'll also be very aware of food combining. So food combining, making sure that you're having mainly one simple food at a time versus having fruit along with your meal, which can actually disrupt or cause issues with more fermentation and gas in the stomach. Generally, you'll have some rice with veggies or dal with a grain, or rice or dal soups, things like this, or just one vegetable made into a soup. That's really nice. But having um, less ideal food combining, such as dairy alongside of fruit, this wouldn't be advised at all. So keeping it very simple. And here are the guidelines to follow, right? So this is great for anyone that might be supporting people during their postpartum period as well. You want to start with simple, easy to digest, gentle foods. Imagine that you're bringing a warm bowl of soup, of squash soup, to a birthing parent right after they have welcomed this new life into the world. The mother is nourished with this warm bowl of soup. That's much more appealing, right? Much more appealing than a smoothie or something cold. So something nice and warm. Focus on fresh, warm, moist, heavy as well, so it's grounding, and non-spicy foods. Warm, spicy herbal teas. Herbal teas that you could put in a thermos and that just sit by the bedside, ready to be drinking. So it's just there for the new mother, ready to be consumed. So having that nice hot beverage is really beautiful. You could also use a thermos to contain broths as well, kept close by. You want to include porridges, soups, stews, and congees as well. Really easy to digest foods that have been cooked well, broken down. There's been so much agni or fire added to it, right? So it's easier for the mother to take in and digest, even if her digestion is slightly dulled. You'll also be including the following foods as some of the bases for the porridges or soups. Things like rice, oats, mung beans. Aduki beans are great as well. And dairy, if warm and if tolerated, hot and also spiced. The spices that should be included are all these beautiful warming spices: cinnamon, cardamom, cumin, coriander as well, fennel, turmeric, saffron, basil, oregano, black pepper. Some of these are great for Agni support. Some of these are really good for helping to release any excess fluids as well that are remaining from the body. So coriander is particularly good for that. Cumin is included with every meal just to support the digestion. Now, just to also add that in the first few days, traditionally it would be advised to actually avoid having some dals for the first few days even. So waiting until about day 10 to start having dals or lentils. However, it really depends on your own digestive system. So if you're feeling hungry enough to go for dals, or hungry enough to even go for meat soups, then you can go for that for sure. But it really depends on your own digestive system. Typically, meat soups would only be added after about 12 days to 2 weeks. But you judge that based on your digestion, also your ancestry as well. Looking to ancestral foods is really important, and something I really encourage as well. What did your grandmothers have? What did your mothers have during their postpartum period? And maybe that's something that would resonate with your own digestive system, your own DNA. So making that consideration as you plan for this period of time. Healthy fats, of course, should really be included. We look at ghee, olive, sesame, as an alternative to ghee, coconut oil, or coconut manna. Coconut manna is a thicker flesh form, but it's been, it is like a thickened form of the cream of the coconut, and can be a nice alternative if you're not consuming dairy. And then having avocado as well. Right, so focus is simple, warm, and fresh as much as possible. And then for lactation supports. So lactation supports will include the following. We have to look at also the environment as well. So looking at diet as well as stress, and what is happening in the surroundings as well. So if there has been a traumatic birth, there may be a little bit of an issue with the initiation of breastfeeding, because we need to have that relaxed nervous system and oxytocin being produced as well to have adequate flow breast milk. So if there's an issue in that regard, then doing everything we can to calm the environment, calm the mother, so that she can adequately support lactation. Nutrition will always correlate to lactation. So for those of you that are Ayurveda practitioners or also Ayurveda students, the rasa, we want to really support the rasa. So that means rasa dhatu should be supported through having adequate agni, right? So having good agni and having simple food that can be transformed into rasa dhatu is important, because the upadhatu of rasa is the breast milk lactation. So it reflects the breast tissue. So this means we really need to support coming to the agni. Breast milk, of course, is considered to be the most perfect food for baby. It's considered to be like the original superfood, right? So it is, we do our best to support lactation. However, we also acknowledge it's not always possible after many different scenarios, right? So if you've tried everything and it's still not working, then you've done your best, and you also have to work on accepting, right? Accepting that process. So this is something I guide a lot of patients around as well. However, breast milk, in terms of the qualities that are there, supporting the growth of baby, immunity of baby, ojas, right? The immunity of baby, and also the chemicals involved with that connection process, the attachment process, where there's a calming, a co-regulation happening with the act of breastfeeding, chest feeding. So establishing breastfeeding right away, as soon as baby is born, is really important to do to start this process. So baby is starting to get colostrum right away. That is considered to be like a liquid gold, incredibly good for just going around the gut, sealing the gut lining, coating the gut lining of baby, and providing beautiful nutrients and immunity for baby as well. And then continuing to feed every 2 hours. Breast milk does come in after about 3 days. Oftentimes at this time, there'll be an engorgement, can be really painful of the breasts. So doing what we can to support through application of warmth to the area of the breasts, and maybe even some cabbage leaves can be helpful at this time too, if there is a painful engorgement. So cabbage leaves can be steamed, warmed, pounded with a mortar and pestle and applied. That can be really, really helpful. And otherwise, taking a nice warm bath or hot shower, that can really help to relieve. Doing some expression of the milk can help as well. So you're just helping to release some of the fluid. And then things will start to regulate after a week or two. And if they don't, having extra support through a lactation counselor is advised. Skin to skin does help, as I mentioned, promote breast milk production. So continuing to do that as part of your process in promoting lactation. Hydrating, lots of warm fluids, herbal teas. Now, what are the special foods for breast milk? We are looking at including garlic in our diet, nettles. So this is nettle leaf, shatavari. Shatavari is the Ayurvedic herb that's used so often for breast milk production. Milky oats, this is also known as oat straw. Almonds that have been soaked overnight, peeled the next day, and taking a handful of those every day. That can be really wonderful for breast milk production. Maybe even making an almond milk as well. Oatmeal is a great galactagogue. Galactagogue is another term for lactation support. And then the spices fennel and fenugreek, which are included in so many Ayurvedic postpartum teas or remedies to support the production of breast milk as well. Marshmallow root is another great one to use. Soaked dates overnight, included in an almond milk or a whole organic milk blended. That can be a really beautiful remedy as well. And then again, making sure there's adequate fats, ghee, coconut manna, whatever great oil that you're using, but including more of it. So in Ayurveda, the use of ghee would be like a few teaspoons a day to support breast milk production. Right? And it always depends on you. So, working with another health practitioner can give you those specific guidelines needed. If you're unsure how much is the right amount for you, you can check in with your Ayurvedic doctor or holistic healthcare practitioner if they're familiar with Ayurveda as well. So yes, the healthy fats is extremely important. So healthy fats, because the breast milk is really made of fat, right? There's so much fat in breast milk itself. So we want to be supporting that production of fat. So it's not taking too much fat away from your own tissues, your own dhatus. So what if I don't feel well though? What if I don't feel well in my postpartum period? Firstly, I want to mention what is a postpartum period, first of all. So we are specifically talking about this particular window of healing in 6 weeks' time. However, we still look at the year as being a postpartum year and maybe even beyond, because in Ayurveda, we look at when the period comes back as being um, another time past postpartum. But until your period doesn't come, you're still actually working with a lot of the postpartum hormones, right? So once your period comes back, there's been some more regulation. And periods can really range, right? So they can come back after 6 weeks, maybe even less sometimes. And sometimes they can come back after closer to 2 years' time. So it really depends on your own constitution, your own dosha, what's happening in your hormones, your stress levels, and how much you're also breastfeeding as well. So the postpartum time can really extend, and sometimes you might not feel well after 8 months' time, and you're wondering why. Well, I really want to emphasize here, it's not your fault at all. We're living in a system that really is lacking, right? Lacking in its supports for new families. And so, again, as I come to close up the material of this class, really emphasizing that I want everyone to feel a sense of inspiration in how they can support their best friend, their dear sister, their family member, or even a distant contact in their postpartum period. Because it is going to take our collective remembering, right? A collective awakening back into how to offer this support. As I mentioned, it could be generation ago or even more generations ago where there was an implementation of a postpartum period. Whether you're from South Asian culture, an indigenous culture, or even another culture itself, there's always postpartum guidelines within your traditions. I can say that I guarantee that there would be, but we have lost some way where there's this emphasis on bouncing back, right? There's such an emphasis on bouncing back where, thankfully in Canada, if you are employed by somebody else, you will have a postpartum maternity or paternity leave. You'll have a time away for getting to know yourself as a parent. And especially if you've just given birth, recovering from that process. However, in places like the States, where there's like sometimes only a 6 week period and you're expected to bounce back into work right away. Well, your brain has changed significantly in pregnancy. It's changed. There's actually been changes to your brain, your capacity for remembering. Your memory has changed because your nervous system is really wired to be caring for another little one. So please know it's not your fault at all. But let's seek out support, right? So seek out support from someone you trust, and please confide in them if you don't feel well. Seek out support from your trusted healthcare team, your GP or holistic health provider, Ayurveda doctor. Maybe it's a lactation counselor, maybe even pelvic floor physiotherapist. If you're having pain in that area, it's also not your fault, right? Getting the support you need is really important. If there's any incontinence issues, if you're having remaining tightness or pain, vaginismus, then seeking out support from a pelvic health physio could be really beneficial. And seeking out mental health support from a trusted counselor, right? So this is also really important. And I want to emphasize here, because I do blood work a lot in my practice, it's a really great way that I can assess progress with people as well, and supporting their nutrients. And nutrients are so important to replenish during this time, right? After the birthing process, the loss of blood, giving to a new life. Request blood work from your health practitioner that may otherwise go unnoticed. And this is ferritin, B12, vitamin D3, and then also looking at a thyroid panel as well. It's going to all be important to actually help to identify if there is something wrong, something actually wrong on a physical level. Okay. So here is your Ayurveda postpartum preparation checklist. So this will be emailed out to you, and you'll have a little bit more detail in it as well. But we want to be including information. You want to be looking at circle of support. You want to consider meal delivery or a time for meal preparation. You also really want to be considering doing a batch cooking day with dear loved ones to put some love into food that you might put into the freezer. Looking at some great recipes for the items that I've suggested: bone broths, soups, porridges, congees. Make up a resource list as well. Have a resource list handy for some of the contacts you may wish to contact in your postpartum period. Have your Abhyanga oils ready for yourself, also for your baby as well. Have some herbal medicines on hand. Things for bathing to heal the perineum that might have tears. This could look like lavender, calendula, chamomile, hypericum. Have some herbs handy to support your lactation. Maybe they're pre-made, maybe they're pre-blended. Maybe you buy some loose herbs and put some intention and love into the gathering of them and preparing them. Fenugreek, oat straw, fennel, seed, red raspberry leaf, all of these are beautiful for breast milk, for also helping to support the red raspberry leaf in particular, to support the cramping and return of the size of the uterus as well. It can minimize pain that's associated with that cramping in the uterus. Prepare those jars of soup that you might freeze. Prepare yourself with 2 thermoses if possible, 1 thermos for tea, 1 thermos for broth. Prepare yourself with a nice fresh jar of ghee that's made with a best friend or a family member on a full moon. Right? So this adds to the ojas in that ghee, that loving energy in that ghee. Prepare some spices that you'll have on hand for tea to support your digestion. Fennel, coriander, cumin. That's wonderful. You might want to add some fresh ginger to that as well. And then have prepared a masala mix that you'll add into a lot of the foods that you're preparing. And this is, you want to have some turmeric that helps to do some cleansing of the blood and release cleansing of the uterus as well, to expel the remaining blood. You want to have some cumin, fennel seed, and coriander seeds, and also use some fresh ginger and garlic with your cooking as well. Okay, so this is a nice checklist for you. Also will be provided. So of course, I want to thank you all so much for joining me tonight for this webinar on postpartum care and the Ayurveda postpartum care and all of these traditional remedies that were shared with you tonight. Thank you so much for listening. I again really want to thank Ismat Dalla, Ismat Ji, Dr. Ismat Nathani. Thank you so much for all of your love and support, for all of us that are connected to CAISH. And thank you so much to the Center for Ayurveda and Indian Systems of Healing. And just to check in, are there any questions at all? For anyone that's listening, feel free to send a note in the chat box here, and I'm happy to answer questions. And I've also listed my links for booking with me if you're interested to book with me. If you don't already work with me, I could potentially see you as a new patient. So you could send me an email. I have my links actually here in the chat box for you if you'd like to learn more about how to book with me. I will be offering $40 off your initial session with me. And if you're unsure, you can book a 15-minute session and we can chat some more about any health concerns that you might have. Yeah, and I'd be happy to speak with you. Yes, and Nadia, you're asking if there's any recommendations for what to do with the placenta and umbilical cord according to Ayurveda. So I will say that in Ayurveda, it's never recommended to eat the placenta, right? So this is something that has been taught in other traditions, but in Ayurveda, it's not recommended to do so. It's considered to be something to be let go of during this time. So I, recommend thinking of something that could be meaningful to do with the placenta. So maybe you want to do some sort of ceremony and plant it. So this is something that we did for both of my daughters. We planted the placenta and we did a lot of prayers and thanks because this was something that held so much life for the life that was growing in your uterus. So giving thanks in whatever way is a ceremony for you can be beautiful. And then the umbilical cord is also something you could, just put a lot of intention around the cutting moment. There are some ceremonies where you would burn instead of cut. As far as I know, with my limited understanding, it would still be cut very quickly in Ayurveda. However, what's important to take note of is that it wouldn't be cut until the pulsing has stopped. So that pulsing should be stopped so that all of the rakta dhatu, the blood from the placenta, will be taken from baby. So baby will receive all of that blood adequately. And so once that pulsing has stopped, then it's time. Then it's time to cut it. So it could be a few minutes, it could be 10 minutes or so, but you just pay attention to that. There's no rush to cut it. Right. So there might be pressure, I'll say that. There might be pressure to cut it from the midwives or the OBG, but staying sure that you want it part of your own birth plan to wait until the pulsing stops to cut it. And you'll let everyone know, right? This is your birth. You get to let people know when you're ready to cut the umbilical cord. Right. So there's a question on preventing colic for new babies. So this is the beauty of these teachings, is that all of these guidelines here in supporting mother's digestion will also be supportive for baby's digestion, because the more that mother is taking in those good quality spices and herbs, and the more that we're avoiding anything that could be complicated for the digestive system, then this will actually prevent colic for baby. Sometimes babies will still be having gas, and you can do a little bit of administration of some fennel water to baby. But I would only do this under the guidance of a support of the doctor, because it'd be done in a particular way and you'd like to have some guidance on that. But really it's just making some fennel tea and giving a little bit to baby at a time. So it could be me giving like a quarter teaspoon of a fennel tea to baby. Another way to manage it would be mother is taking a lot of fennel tea, so that can be really helpful. And also taking some warm ghee, and applying it into the belly button for baby. And just letting it sit there in the belly button. This is after the umbilical cord wound has healed. Okay. Otherwise, doing some massage can be very, very helpful too. And any other questions at all? Okay, wonderful. Well, I don't see any questions coming in. So I welcome you all to reach out to me if you like. If there's any questions that come up from this webinar or you're curious about working with me, feel free to reach out. There's going to be a beautiful workshop coming up on immunity with Dr. Ismat Nathani coming up later in the month. So please look out for information on that. And please look out for the email from us after this webinar that we'll be sharing information on a future course as well as just $40 off on an initial session with me. Okay, so a big thank you to everyone. Okay, much love and have a beautiful evening.